Hey everyone, we recently hosted an interview with Alex Savard, speaker, author, and creator of the Virtuous Leadership System. We've benefited massively from his work and are strong advocates for him. If you're interested in learning about virtuous leadership, what your temperament is and what virtue challenges you, how to discover your mission, or want to achieve personal growth, go to alexsavard.com to see his online courses, tests, and books. We hope you enjoy this episode. You can listen to most economists these days in Canada talk about the productivity gap. And well, why is that? Well, it's because people, why would they work harder than they have to if they don't realize
there's no motivation
behind it? Exactly. Yeah. Even I think this is an opinion. I think that the idolization of hard work is actually very bad.
I think I've seen less of a problem with idolizing hard work and more on the opposite spectrum of people living out what I think is the worst possible career advice, which is find something you love to do and you'll never work another day. I saw this in university mostly. People jump from program to program or, major to major, looking for that thing that really speaks to them. When, these things can all be difficult.
When it comes to discovering your mission in life and what you're called to do in terms of work, it is really a question of justice, and it's a question of humility to say, okay, what am I good at? Right. Can I recognize my strengths? And magnanimity to say, what's the greatest thing that I can possibly do with this?
I think it's important for an individual to kind of recognize their natural aptitudes, their talents, their strengths, because that helps them create an honest conversation with oneself and with others they work with to recognize where they add value, where they feel they contribute the most, and can help the greater whole.
Welcome to the Ord Life Podcast.
We'll put on the we'll put YouTube on the projector. The little boys, they want Shaun the Sheep, or they want Wallace and Gromit. And now the algorithm knows that we're interested in planes, so it'll suggest, the F-22 this or the SR-71 that, and Ambrose always wants to watch the airplane videos.
Have you guys ever been to the Abbotsford Air Show?
I went for the first time this year.
Oh, did you? I've lived in Abbotsford for the bulk of my adolescence. I've never been.
It was great.
Yeah. What's the experience like? You're on the tarmac. Do you get to see, touch, and feel the planes?
You can. Yeah. So I didn't know this until we went. We went with just enough time to arrive 10 minutes before the actual flying starts. But there are, I can't remember the names of them now, but big, cargo military planes of all sorts of shapes and sizes that you can go and walk on and walk through and tour around. And so I know next time to arrive early and to go check that out. And then, the rest of it is, the Abbotsford Airport. You're just on the grass next to the runway. And so there's really no bad seat. But there's a variety of airplanes. So the snowbirds, is that what they're called?
Yeah.
They come flying formation. It started with a parachute exhibition, I want to say, or demonstration.
Okay.
And this plane full of parachuters makes multiple passes, and different people come out at different times. And they'll do different maneuvers for the link legs, and then all of the parachutes will be on the outside, and it's spinning around and all sorts of things they do. And then that ends, and then 10 minutes later they're flying the F-35 or they're flying the F-18s or whatever. It was really neat.
It's the real Top Gun pilots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the planes will fly different maneuvers, showing off the jets, whatever, going fast flyby at high speed or low speed, or turning this or turning that. And then there's one where it's two F-18s, and they were doing bombing drill runs, and it would show you how they can work together and do different things. Okay. That was neat. And then there was I think it's called the I can't remember.
C-130?
Yeah.
How do you know that information, Anthony?
Well, it's very well established.
It's the workhorse.
Yeah, it's a gunship, and it's pretty.
No, it's a cargo airplane.
Oh, okay, but yes, but the context.
Maybe I'm thinking of a different one.
From no. So it is, but it can also be a gunship.
Oh, okay.
You can equip it with all sorts of different crazy stuff, and it's pretty cool.
And so this thing is a whale. It's huge.
Yeah, it's massive.
And then they're doing demonstrations within the air, and it's as nimble as a ballerina. and it's designed to fly at low speeds, and so
it's a behemoth in the air.
Yeah. And so they'll do like different demonstrations, and she'll, like one was how slow can it possibly go and still like be airborne, and it's so slow, and you're like, this is amazing. This giant thing can just crawl through the sky. And then doing these like agility demonstrations with this huge thing. It was like, yeah, it was neat. So a variety of airplanes, variety of things to see. Like, yeah, you can go touch and feel, and there's food trucks. There's tons of food trucks and things to eat. The regular tickets are just sort of, you mingle around, you find a place on the grass, set up a picnic table or a picnic blanket.
That sounds like fun. Like
it is
sitting on a family picnic. Yeah.
And but you can get the extra special tickets, which I didn't know.
Okay.
You get seats, and you're right on the runway.
Okay. But that would get hot because it's in the summertime, right? And like the tarmac just radiates
We went
heat.
on the first day, which was Friday evening.
Okay.
And it was an evening, so it was great, and so not too hot. I think during the day it would, yeah. And then I think they reserve those seats for air cadets, because most people in those seats were in
more motivation for the kids to be air cadets.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the AC 130 gunship. Okay. So maybe the C 130 is slightly different. But I remember kind of going down that rabbit hole when we were looking at was it
Textron?
Textron.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool because they do the flying like vertical takeoff helicopters that can then flip their wings and go. And it's funny because they
flip the propellers.
Yeah. And they just got in a contract that beat out Lockheed, and then I got into like who produces what for everything, and apparently what Airbus does, and what Textron, Lockheed, all those different things.
Yeah, so that's our latest area of interest in the house with the kids.
Nice. Yeah, my cousin went to the Abbotsford Air Show a couple of years ago, and he's much more into aviation stuff than I am. But there was, I guess, a very cool plane, and one of the pilots of that plane that you could ask questions to. And so he goes up to the pilot, and it's like, it's a cool plane, but I'm sure you're going to tell me that even though it looks cool, it's not as cool as I think it is. And because I guess that was typically his experience. He'd go up to a pilot of whatever cool fighter jet or interesting thing it was.
Down.
They'd play it down, and so he was expecting the same thing to come from this pilot, but he's like, nope, it is 100% as cool as you think it is, and you definitely should be jealous that I get to do this.
Nice.
I'm sure it motivates a lot of these kids to like consider becoming pilots.
Well, I think
from
that's
that
what a lot of
experience.
That's why they do it.
Yeah, and a lot of military movies.
It's like the modern day G.I. Joe, that cartoon that existed back in the 80s to motivate kids to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
consider
Top Gun. That's
Top Gun.
same
Yeah,
idea.
it's a big advertisement, right?
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. It was really neat though. Yeah, like the F-35, because it has those maneuverable. They can reposition or reorient the like the jet at the back. It could do things in the air that just sort of defy your concept of what is physically possible. Like after watching normal planes fly, it was super cool. I'm really looking forward to next year's show.
Yeah. I've heard that like vertical takeoff though burns fuel like nothing else.
Yeah, they did demonstrate that.
Yeah,
I've heard that it can do that. Or I've seen it on whatever videos, but
I have a friend who was part of the Air Force, and he trained. I guess he was a very skilled pilot that he helped train with. Was it the Blue Angels or whatnot? Yeah. So I mean, I got to hear his stories along the way.
That is cool.
Makes me want to hey, we should invite him to hang out and just share some stories, because I think he's gone back into that realm. Of
a couple of years ago when I was in Spain for the Pyrenees University Days, like that conference there before going to World Youth Day, there was I guess like some F-18s because there's a military base close to where we were staying. And these F-18s each day would fly over, and sometimes we'd be out at the conference so you wouldn't hear them. But there was one day when we were getting into the van just because the day schedule was different, and these things flew over maybe half a kilometer above us, but the feeling in your chest from how loud they were was so cool. And one of the guys who was there actually knew the pilots because he was also in the military and was at that base, and so he'd sometimes, and then it was convenient enough for him to come to the conference. But it's like, yeah, tomorrow at like whatever time you're going to see them as well. And there's a beautiful lake, and we were driving next to that lake that next day, and we just saw the F-18s, and we were going like 100 kilometers an hour, but these things just ripping over the lake, and it was so cool to see.
Yeah. I don't know why it's so cool, but it is just so cool.
Yeah.
Like to feel it, to hear it, it just like it gets in.
It engages all the senses.
Yeah. And there is a significant difference, like going from the Snowbirds to the C-130, and then the F-18s come out, and you're like, "Whoa, this is another level." And I don't know if it's a very male thing, but it's just,
Totally a male thing.
yeah, it totally sparks something inside. You're like, "Yes, I'm yelling, and I don't know why I'm yelling."
All right, shall we pivot to a more intellectual conversation about?
But this is not intellectual conference. This is great.
All right.
Speaking of capital and the means of production, no, is that not the airplane?
Somewhat.
They're not
Somewhat.
really. They're not means of production.
Yeah.
Those big, awesome airplanes, but they are the inheritance of generations of people working and human ingenuity and creativity and engineering.
Yes.
And I don't know, it's never the pinnacle because they're always advancing, but like the pinnacle today of what technology and humans can create
with their labor and their capital.
Yeah, their labor and capital.
The striving for bringing the best and innovating.
So just for context, we are going over part 3, even though this will be the 4th episode of the podcast that we've done on it. On, AJ, how do you want to pronounce it?
Good question. Laborum exercens?
Exergens?
Exergens? Okay.
Yeah. And the title of the section is called Conflict Between Labor and Capital in the Present Phase of History. Do either of you guys know or want to give the context of kind of the background of some of this stuff when he's talking about Marxism versus capitalism?
Well, he wrote this during the Cold War.
Yeah.
And and you know, the striving of ideologies between capitalism and Marxism. And he grew up, obviously, he grew up in that struggle.
Like first-hand experience.
Yeah, as a child living through World War II in Poland under the Nazis, and then being taken over by the Soviets. So yeah, he speaks with a lot of first-hand experience on this stuff.
Yeah, I find the history of his philosophy actually extremely interesting because Marx kind of combined two things, which is the materialism, and I actually discuss it briefly here when they talk about dialectical materialism, dialectical materialism. But he's also pulling from Feuerbach. And Feuerbach, another German philosopher, Feuerbach's big idea was that God did not make man made God out of his oppression. So because man is imperfect and we deal with all these different things, then we're going to project all of our desires for perfection onto this thing that we call God. And Marx took that idea and said, well, the reason why there's oppression is because of class conflict. And so actually a part of Marx's political or philosophical project is the eradication of God from society in terms of his views and everything. But yeah, to kind of set the background a little more for our listeners, when we're talking about conflict, the conflict between labor and capital, very much writing against Marx. John Paul II is talking about this. But obviously capitalism sees the idea of like the need to maximize profits, because both capitalism and communism stem from this idea that man is merely material. He is not a person with a soul, with spiritual capacities or faculties. That's just an external or phenomenon that we can explain away by, in Marx's view, oppression and class conflict. But man is merely material, and so you have capitalism, which seeks to maximize profit. It sees the value and dignity of the person as what they can accumulate for themselves, accumulation for accumulation's sake. And then out of that, because you have people who are trying to maximize profits, you have the issue of those who have what is capital, right? The means of production.
The owners versus
versus the people who supply the labor. But all of it very much stems from this view that man is merely material. And then communism's solution to that, which still holds a fundamental, or the first principle that man is merely material, is that we should just share everything. And by sharing everything, we're going to get rid of all this opposition and class conflict. And so that's the setting or the background that John Paul II begins writing into this stuff with. And I'm sure in our discussion we'll get into how John Paul II sees things as different, how Catholic social teaching articulates things as different, and how we need to be very aware of those things when we're looking at stuff in society today.
Yeah, and I think John Paul says it very well in establishing the proper view of this and the Catholic view of this, which is that labor and the laborer is the reason for all of this.
Yeah, it's
to
primary.
exist.
Yeah.
It's the primary
Yep.
cause.
Yep.
Whereas the capital and all of the stuff that goes along with it, it's the instrumental cause.
Yeah,
It's
and the result of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the means, but the person always has to be the ends. And so both of those views that you elucidated are incorrect because they both dehumanize the person.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting because I've got a way that I wanted this conversation to flow in terms of timeline, but I'm happy to hit in whatever here. Oh, where was it? Yeah. So when capital and labor are in conflict, then I think it's very easy for us to just view our work as something that's toilsome, but we view our labor as an exchange for capital, as opposed to seeing our labor as what John Paul II says is like, yes, like you earn your daily bread, right? That is one thing that you need, like everyone needs to have their material needs met. But above that, we really need to be exercising our intellectual and physical faculties and develop the cultural and moral levels of society. But yeah. What else do you guys think? Sean, what other points did you have from here?
Well, the natural incorrect conclusion that the arch capitalist can make when they see labor as a means instead of an end is in this principle of maximizing profit by establishing the lowest possible wage. So I think we are living through the consequence of that right now in a very particular way. And it's from decades of, large multinational corporations taking their labor, doing this labor arbitrage of taking their production overseas to wherever they could do it cheapest, which, is a rational thing to do in terms of striving for, maximizing profit. But the consequence today is that we can't make anything for ourselves. And all of the knowledge and ability to make things is in China or other countries who were beneficiaries of, this like exploitation for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And now who has to deal with the consequences is all of, this society that was perpetuating this, maximizing profit by seeking the lowest possible wage. And now we are totally dependent as a society for things to be made from someone else.
Yeah. Side philosophical thought. Do you know which philosopher kind of really pushed that idea of like complete open borders, free trade, free all that?
I'm not familiar. Sure.
J.S. Mill, who wrote the book On Liberty and was one of the first libertarians. So it was like Bentham before him, and then J.S. Mill was very big there. And it's funny because his big things were absolute free speech. So, because he didn't believe in that there was objective truth. So it's like, say whatever you want. Like you shouldn't have to censor, because to censor is to assume your own infallibility. He was also very big on free action. So you can do anything that you want, right? Like again, no morality. It's like you can do whatever you want.
Like no drugs are illegal.
Yeah.
Like you just make your own
have
decisions.
as much alcohol as you want. Free living. Like if you want to live with 5 people, go for it and live however you want. And then also, big on free trade. And I mean, part of the critique of it is that he worked for the East India Trade Company in the 1850s, which was exporting opium from India to China. And so you can find it in multiple points of his book where he's saying like the Chinese people should be able to have as much opium as they want. But he's very much
and we should be able to sell them as much as they are willing to buy.
yeah, exactly. So it's interesting where some of those ideas come from. And he was obviously more left on the political spectrum. And I forget exactly who it was. Who was the other person who was writing kind of against him in England at this time. But he was more like, it actually might have even been a Canadian, or what would end up being a Canadian. And kind of this idea of like, no, like if you just do that, then you're going to lose a national identity. Yeah. So it's just interesting kind of where some of those ideas that we champion
and this is
come
where,
from.
like an economist would look at it, a sort of purely rational academic economist would say, we should absolutely have no barriers to trade, free trade everywhere, because things end up at the most efficient possible configuration.
Yeah, but it's interesting because you're talking about efficiency in terms of maximizing profit, and you are pitting labor against capital, because typically in these situations you find laborers who only trade their time and their toil for capital. And getting back to what John Paul II says in this quote here from point 11, he says, like talking about Rerum Novarum, which was what Pope Leo wrote in the late 1800s, very much in response to capitalism versus communism. He says, in this analysis, work is seen as a great reality with a fundamental influence on the shaping in a human of the way the world that the Creator has entrusted to man. It is a reality closely linked with man as the subject of work and with man's rational activity. He goes on to say, this reality fills human life and strongly affects its value and meaning. Even when it is accompanied by toil and effort, work is still something good. And so man develops through love for work. So very much going back to this idea that we're not merely material, in which case you'd view trading labor and toil for capital as something good, and you, as somebody who has capital, you should be giving up the least amount of it for the most amount in return. But fundamentally, and this kind of goes back to a lot of our conversations with Alex Havard, like work is meant to help people become great, right? It's not just work is not simply a matter of saying, what can I extract from you as my employee? It's saying, how do I bring out the greatness in you? How do I put you in a position to be successful? How can I, as a leader, achieve personal greatness by bringing out the greatness in you? And I think, yeah, Sean, to your point, a lot of academic economists will say, oh yeah, we can just do this, but are you doing that because you want to maximize profits because it is economically efficient? Or is that because it's actually what's best for these people? Because yeah, in many cases, these economies do end up getting exploited because their standards of living can't be raised by that much because everybody is working for the least.
Yeah, because they're prioritizing the profit.
It's even a poor outcome for the exploiter in the end.
Well, yes, and yeah, we'll get into that as well, because they're not putting their labor, or they're not being just themselves, but they're also not putting their capital to the objectively best use possible.
Yeah, it's where's the highest margin is the only consideration.
Exactly.
As opposed to like what's best for not just the individual, which is also like obviously the primary concern, but what's better for society, right? Because you end up with a very fragile society when everything that you need for society to function is built in one place, and if they decide to be antagonistic, well, then that obviously falls apart. So it's certainly much less efficient if and you wouldn't do every country, but if more countries built more things, as opposed to just the most specialized people that can do it the cheapest, but it leads to a more resilient society and a society that's more buffered from the malice of someone else or another country or another society. And it also enables people in that society, that particular society, to do this work that should be available.
A greater contribution from the greater whole.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the interesting point, even just beyond the geopolitical, is what is this country worth to, and what are the people in this country worth to? Are they worth something merely economical? Or, because like efficiency in terms of profits, I think we can make that point. But then down the line, what do people view themselves as? Do they view themselves simply as labor?
Yeah, like it's just another resource to exploit?
Which goes back to this, like, I have a very materialistic view of my own self. And then you have what we're really seeing in the West now, a massive, massive, massive crisis of identity, and people not knowing who they are, who they want to be, and people putting off every single life plan for their career, and then being left with nothing, and then you
it also creates an imbalance in the family.
Exactly. Well, that's just it. You get
a lack of family.
That's very true.
Exactly. Yeah. A lack of family, or like, unfortunately, and this is an interesting insight from some doctors over at UBC that I was able to hear a presentation from, the issue of euthanasia, which, without getting into too much of the ethics, like, people are not dying because they're afraid of fear or killing themselves using MAID.
Their fear of just not being useful anymore.
Well, no, it's because they feel like they don't have anything to live for, right?
The lack of purpose.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so I think it's interesting because when people see themselves as mere like input-output, it does create this crisis of identity. And I think as well, that we've had a number of conversations about artificial intelligence and computers and technology, period. But you really have to be aware of, well, what's my value add? And I think that's why a number of people are very afraid of artificial intelligence, because they don't recognize, well, the virtue, the value of the work is a subjective nature of the work. It's how you're growing as an individual.
Right.
Yeah. Any other points that we can make? out
I
of.
mean, to that point, is
Yeah.
like, I think it's important for an individual to kind of recognize their natural aptitudes, their talents, their
Yeah.
strengths, because that helps them create an honest conversation with oneself and perhaps, with others they work with, is to recognize where they add value, or where they feel they contribute the most,
Yeah.
and can help the greater whole.
Yeah, and even going back to what Alex Savard was talking about in terms of mission, right? He says like you need to discover your mission, which is the intersection of your temperament, but also your talents. It's not what do I want to do, right? It's what are my talents and what do people say you're really, really good at? And then as well, combine that with our conversation on justice. And I was just editing all these podcasts. So if you haven't listened to them, go back because they're amazing. But this idea of justice when it comes to how we relate to others, right? That having a balanced life, balance is, he says, kind of, it's like a psycho bubble. Whereas the reality of a situation is if you feel like you need a better work-life balance, no, you're actually lacking the virtue of justice. And so when it comes to discovering your mission in life and what you're called to do in terms of work, it is really a question of justice, and it's a question of humility to say, okay, what am I good at?
Right.
Can I recognize my strengths? And then magnanimity to say, what's the greatest thing that I can possibly do with this? But also that element of justice to say, am I relating to others well? Am I using this talent well? Am I viewing myself merely as economic input and output, or am I recognizing that there's something more that I can do with my life, that I can, yes, earn my daily bread, but I can also contribute to the cultural and moral development of society?
And what's curious is if you don't have that idea of mission or your unique talents, you just see work as like, oh, I just put in my time for the sake of getting this resource. And then you move from like job to job that way.
Well, yeah, you see people moving from job to job, but you also see the productivity gap, right? Like you can listen to most economists these days in Canada talk about the productivity gap. And well, why is that? Well, it's because people, why would they work harder than they have to if they don't realize
there's no motivation
behind it? Exactly.
Yeah.
Even I think this is an opinion. I think that the idolization of hard work is actually very bad. Not to say that you shouldn't be working productively and efficiently and effectively, but I think that if somebody's just like, oh, look, I'm working so hard, that looks very different for a lot of different people. I've seen people who are like, oh, I work so hard, but they're on their phone for half of their work period. Or, oh, I work so hard, but they're actually just not thinking about what they're doing.
Right.
That kind of work smarter versus harder thing. I think idolizing hard work as like, this is how you can make it in life, isn't actually the best. I think when you have a sense of justice of, yeah, I have these relationships that I need to uphold, I have these talents that I need to develop, you end up working a lot more efficiently and productively because you realize the place of work in your life. You realize that work is where you're meant to develop virtue, where you are meant to contribute something more to society than just getting a wage. And then you also recognize that there's a certain period of my day when I'm working, and there's also a certain period of my day when I should not be working, when I should be developing myself in other ways, physically, by exercise, like eating well. If I have a family, attending to that. If I don't have a family, well, why don't I have a family? Like, am I being selfish in my pursuit to not have a family?
Yeah, because that hustle culture, let's call it, can be very addictive. Because, I am putting this hard work. Okay, look how much money I'm creating.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of be addicted towards that. You lose a sense of like the meaning and the purpose, which has more of a longevity. And if you kind of see that to its end, is like, I'll work really hard so I get a pile of money and then I don't have to work anymore.
Yeah, or that's just the idea of like living for myself. And I think it's interesting because The Economist just did a series of articles a couple months ago about the state of relationships among young people. And for anyone who wants to find that, it's out online. And it's very interesting because they bring up a lot of points. They're trying to diagnose why is it that so few young people are getting married or are even getting into relationships these days. And a couple different things they say is like selectiveness, right? Because we have dating apps and you can just pick and pull sliders.
You can pre-filter someone before even meeting them.
Right? Yeah, it was funny.
Like if you live in a small town and you have like 4 people to pick from, like, that's a much easier decision.
That's actually funny because a number of years ago, maybe when I was in grade 8, so 9 years ago, my grandnonna passed away, and my grandnonna, like great grandmother and great grandfather in Italian, my grandnonna was very down. So my uncle asked him, like, to try and lift his spirits, like, hey, can you tell me about the story about how you met, like my uncle's grandmother? And he was expecting to hear this like beautiful love story about these two people who met in this small town after World War II. And my grandnonna, like in a very melancholic tone, just goes, well, after the war, a lot of men had died. There weren't many women in the town. I was single. She was single. So I said, you want to get married? And my uncle, just like his face just kind of dropped. He was kind of trying to get all cheery and then just right down. And I was like, oh. So it's a funny story. But yeah, Sean, to your point about selectiveness. But yeah, I think when people very much just view their lives as a means of accumulating for themselves, then it becomes very difficult to have a relationship, because how can you have that magnanimity to want to live for somebody else?
I think I've seen less of a problem with idolizing hard work and more on the opposite spectrum of people living out what I think is the worst possible career advice, which is find something you love to do and you'll never work another day. And so people will find something they're good at, but, do I love it, right? Does it really speak to me? And then they'll leave that and they'll try something else.
Yeah,
and then they'll try something else and they'll jump. I saw this in university mostly. People jump from program to program or, major to major, looking for that thing that really speaks to them. When, these things can all be difficult and they can all come with toil and hard work. So this notion that you'll find something you love and you'll never work another day, it's trying to escape the suffering that comes with work.
Yeah, the toil. Yeah.
And to find a hobby that you can do professionally, which is either impossible to find, or when you do find it and it becomes work, then it becomes work and you don't love it anymore, in this same way that it was, fun and enjoyable way before.
Yeah. It's almost like you have to love the toil of whatever you're in.
Well, right? or my theory is, so, it should be the Alex Havard, right? It's the idea is it should not be find something you love, but find something you're good at. And if you pursue something you're good at, you will come to love it over time.
Yeah.
How I process that is feeling versus meaning. If you are looking for something you love, I think that statement has good intent.
Yeah. It's not like a malicious thing.
Yeah.
It's this hopeful thing that.
Right. But then you're seeking this feeling from in your particular example is seeking an educational pursuit and just flipping back and forth between different programs or whatnot, or within jobs. This is interesting for the time being, then you flip to another job. But if you're seeking meaning, is there's an enduring nature of I'm going to stay at this because I know there's meaning out of that.
Well, yeah, and I think part of it too comes down to what do you mean by love? And getting to the relationship thing, getting to the find a job you love and you'll never have to work another day of your life. It's what do you mean by love? Right? Do you mean by something that you're going to work for and sacrifice for and recognize growth through toil for, which is very much the Christian conception of love, right? It's Christ on the cross. And
the sacrificial love.
Yeah,
and
you
the value
do that.
in
Exactly.
suffering.
Right. You do that in a relationship where you have to give up and concede and give yourself to somebody. You do that in work when your work is for a purpose that is higher than you. But if you have a very subjective idea of love that isn't based in sacrifice and self-giving, where I've experienced that is what feels good, right? And so that if you don't know what love is, something that you're willing to sacrifice for because it is greater than you, then that saying of find something that you love becomes find something that you feel good doing and you'll never have to work another day in life, which is a call to just be comfortable. Right. At the end of the day, it's what it is. It's avoid toil and all, which is not work, because work goes hand in hand with toil. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of how work has become. We ate the apple,
I think of the parallel within sports, since we were speaking about sports earlier. It's if you only want to be on a team that basically wins all the time.
Yeah.
That can't happen all the time, but it's the losses that need to occur is just part of the story of winning the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, it's the
is even more meaningful.
Yeah, it's the underdog
because
who has better character at the end of the day, right? It's who's going to fight for it and work for it harder. And you even see that with individuals who are outstanding at a given sport, but they can't do anything else in any other part of life. And you realize, well, it's not because they actually worked hard at that sport. It's just because it was raw talent and a feeling that made them love it.
Right.
But unfortunately, just for whatever reason, I think part of that's on the coaches to be able to say, no, the biggest part of what you can get out of this sport is the virtue of hard work, of fortitude, of whatever that might be. So you can take those, what typically we call in resumes transferable skills, and move that into another area, because the odds of you making it in whatever.
I have a neighbor who's a firefighter. And we were talking about youth sports. And he was saying people have this idea that, okay, this, my son was an accomplished hockey player and he went really far into whatever, minor league, and he should be able to do so many things professionally.
Yeah.
And he says at the fire hall, they get these people who have come through this system, and they are I want to be polite and say poor firefighters or inadequate or like unable to work on a team, which is what like the thing you would think that they had learned most. It's because they lived in this bubble world for so long, and everything has been devoted towards them getting to this level of sports achievement. That, you know, like the parents drove them everywhere they had to go and made all their food for them, and like actually they had to work hard at their sport, but they didn't really learn the virtue of work in that same way, because everything was pushing towards this goal, and they ended up with zero transferability of skills.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. I do want to try and make sure that we do this in cyclical justice.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought another really interesting point was what I was leading into with the airplane talk at the beginning is the inheritance. I'm quoting the inheritance of what is given to the whole of humanity in the resources of nature, and the inheritance of what others have already developed on the basis of those resources. So in working, man enters into the labor of others, right? We've inherited the thinking and the hard work from those that have come before us when we're using microphones and computers and tables. Like, this is our inheritance of all the hard work and labor of those that have gone before us that we get to benefit from, that we get to enjoy and use. And I just think it's just this idea that the stuff, like the means of production, the actual things we use, which are means in of themselves, just connecting it with that human reality that's behind it.
Yeah. Well, even Havard talking about mission, he says when you really want to know your mission, like you have to, one exercise that he'll do is like you have to write down your life story to really figure out what are the things that I've been given in my life that would kind of push me into a given direction. And so for us, similar to that idea, we have this inheritance of work and of capital that is available to us. And so it's not just a question of, I have to make it out on my own. Well, no, we have to use these things in the best way possible, because as John Paul II says, we have those two inheritances, that of what has been given humanity and resources, and also that of what has already been labored for.
I think of inheritance you could do two things. You could squander it, or you could just basically say, hey, this is a great opportunity, what's been entrusted to me, and build upon it.
Yeah.
And so I think within the context, if you are the beneficiary of an inheritance, is to recognize the tremendous responsibility you have there for future generations to come.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That's pretty good. I don't think I have too much else underlined.
I like the idea of...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, the awareness of working for yourself as opposed to being a cog in the machine. What did you guys think of that part? Did you read that part, AJ?
I have thoughts on it.
Let's hear them.
Put me on the spot. I think if you're part of a cog of a machine, you're kind of displacing...
I should just give the context on that first.
Okay.
He says, here's a quote. The awareness of working for yourself, or man working for himself, this awareness is extinguished within him in a system of excessive bureaucratic centralization, which makes the worker feel that he is just a cog in a huge machine. Right? So in this socialist, communist world where, it's kind of counterintuitive, where it's sort of obvious why you would expect someone to be a cog in the capitalist world, right? Like you're just...
Well, I don't think it is counterintuitive, and I think that's the point that's being made here, even when he says, let's see if I can find this out. The area of thinking in these categories of economism went hand in hand with formation of a materialist philosophy, as his philosophy developed from the most elementary and common phase, also called common materialism, because it professes to reduce spirituality to superfluous phenomenon. In other words, what's being said there is capitalism and communism stem from that same idea. And if you as an audience member want to learn more about this, I would highly recommend Fulton Sheen's Communism in the Continents of the West. He does an exceptional job of fleshing out how both of these ideas of economics stem from the underlying proposition that man is merely material. But yeah, so I don't think.
Well, counterintuitively, because nominally, at least, the communist is supposedly motivated by doing this for the people.
Yeah.
Even though they end up in the exact same place.
Yes, and it's because they still view labor and capital as things that are opposed to each other, because that's what you have to kind of view if you live in a purely materialistic mindset. Whereas the entire project of the second piece is to say, no, these two things have to go hand in hand. That your labor yields capital, and capital is meant to be put to good use through more labor.
Yeah, and to support labor.
Exactly.
Labor,
Yeah, so going back and forth there. I think you have more thoughts on that, 'cause I think there's a good way to end this conversation is to talk briefly about private property and some of the points that he makes. Because we should also mention that sometimes the Catholic position will end up seeming whatever is contrary to the present. So if the world is feeling very capitalist, then sometimes the position of these encyclicals come across as communist. Or if the world is leaning more communist, then this position in the encyclicals can sometimes be a little more capitalist. And I think, again, we've kind of talked about it, but our view of the human person is that the person has both body and soul. It's not just merely body and material. But part of this talks about private property. And I think the best quote that we were able to find was, "The right to private property is subordinated to the right to common use, to the fact that goods are meant for everyone."
Well, isn't that, quote, more supportive towards the communist line of thinking?
Well, see, it is, but yeah. And I would say that viewing it as capitalism versus communism is, but if you take that a step deeper, well, what is that calling people to do, right? What is the challenge there? Beyond just, saying let's distribute things equally. It's yes, do that, but not from a sense of because we idolatrize egalitarianism, just that everybody's equal and so everyone should get equal things. But why? Well, it's because people need that. And so it's just for me as somebody who has something to give somebody who is in need of something. But beyond that, not just the material, going back to like that quote of, what is it, like, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, he can feed for the rest of his life. Seeing how your capital can be put to use in terms of not just...
Oh, by the way, yeah, and this is, I'm totally taking this from... Who are the guys that did the Good Money podcast? New Polity?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, but give a man a fishing rod, and he will eat for life.
Yeah, exactly. So,
right,
like, within the greater context...
Which I love that extra step, because it brings it back to the material, this capital thing, and sharing it for good use.
Yeah. And I think that's... you really have to dive deeper in terms of what these encyclicals actually get into and what they're actually calling people to do. In terms of people who have labor, it's to recognize that your labor isn't just a means of transaction. It is the way that you're called to develop as a human person. And also for people who have capital, like you have or
like before you even get to that, like private ownership is a good thing.
Yes.
But you have a higher calling to be just and generous.
Exactly, just and generous, and to realize that there is, and Sean, you talked about this in the past when it comes to the purpose of money and why do people get more things than others? Well, it's like a test, right? God is testing you. How well can you use this thing? I think the position that gets flushed out here and that we've talked about a lot in the podcast is it's not a matter of having a bunch of money and not using it. And it's not a matter of using as little money as possible, but it's a matter of using it well. And that comes down to not a materialistic version or view of the person, but it's a virtuous and a soul and embodied soul view of the human person. All right. Thank you for listening. I'm Anthony.
I'm Sean.
I'm AJ.
This podcast has been prepared by Sean Gregory, who is a portfolio manager, AJ Sanson, and Anthony De Lazari, who are associate investment advisors for IA Private Wealth Inc. Opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the portfolio manager and investment advisors only, and do not necessarily reflect those of IA Private Wealth Inc. IA Private Wealth Inc. is a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund and the Canadian Investment Regulatory Organization. IA Private Wealth is a trademark and business name under which IA Private Wealth Inc. operates.